Well, we're here today. We just wanted to give you kind of a progress report on what we've been doing to date with RESO standards and trying to integrate them into our data pipeline on homes.com. We have some good news and some bad news to share, and hopefully everybody will get a little insight out of it today. As Art said, Brian and I have been in this industry for about 10 years. We've actually worked together at homes.com for most of that time. I manage a technology team at Homes. Brian's specifically responsible for our data backend and integrating a lot of your data into our platform. I have a slide on here. If anybody's not familiar with Homes.com, we are a national listing advertising portal. We've been doing this since the early 90s, working with a lot of you, and our mission really hasn't changed. We're interested in getting transaction-ready buyers and sellers, connected with your agents. So why did we agree to participate in this case study with RESO standards, right? I guess secretly we were hoping Jeremy was just going to give us a trophy. Just kidding. It is definitely something that's a little bit risky for us to do. We've been aggregating data from MLSs. We have over 600 sources we work with, and like I said, we've been doing it for over a decade. And changing to a new backend is definitely something risky for us, especially when it's cutting edge and new, right? And we found that out already working with some of the platforms that we service data from, that there are going to be some growing pains. So why did we agree to do it? Well, obviously being a charter member of RESO, we have a vested interest in promoting the standards that this organization is here to build. We've always said that. We recognize the value, and we want to continue to try to push it forward and do our part. We obviously see value for our customers. That's obviously a primary driver for us. We think that getting consistency in both the delivery of data and the way the data feels itself and the format of the data is very important for us. It's important for our customers to be doing that correctly. Given the standards that are out there and the discussions that everybody's using, obviously there's going to be reduced maintenance and management of these. That's a primary goal for us. That's why we're on board, and we really want to see that happen. And lastly, and everybody knows change is inevitable. There's already discussions. The RET standard itself has been deprecated. It's not changing. And so anything we're going to do new and grow this industry in data is going to be on these platforms. So we wanted to jump on early and be ready for that. Sorry, I think this transition from Google Slides to this is messed up. There we go. So we just wanted to talk about the charter. When we were jumping into it, what is it we were looking to do, right? In both the data dictionary and in the web API, we wanted to try to relate it to our current listing data process, right? And we had 4 themes we were looking across. Come on, there we go. Obviously, the time to build new feeds. Even though we have a lot of MLS providers already on our platform, we're still continuing to get new ones. So we want to know, how does our existing process relate to the new process when we're starting up new feeds? Obviously, we convert a lot of feeds. MLSs go to new vendors. They get new formats. We've got a lot of MLSs joining, which builds new feeds for us that we have to convert from 3 or 4 separate existing ones to one now new one. We have to update existing ones. New requirements come in all the time. We've got effort involved in adding those new requirements in, so we wanted to understand how the standards are going to help us with those. And then lastly, obviously we get tickets from everyone. There's something wrong. We need to look into it. How does our time to evaluate these issues and correct them change with using RESO standards? There's a theme here with all of these. If this thing will come, there we go, which is time. And we're hoping, we're going to save a lot of time in this effort, and that's the goal. And, we like to use time, as Homer Simpson is here, probably chasing that beer around the clock with his eyes. So what are some of the expectations we had in this effort? When we're jumping into it, what do we expect to see, right? So we know starting up that the first 2 or 3 MLSs we put on this platform are going to be the most amount of work. Even though it's a standard, we expect it to be easier after these, but there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road trying to get the first couple set up. So we know it's going to be front-loaded development. We've got a new framework we're going to have to build to be able to use these RESO data standards and not the typical RETS delivery or even, in some cases, FTP deliveries we have. We know we're going to need new tools to manage them. We're hoping, again, as I stated earlier, that consistency in these standards reduces complexity. So we want to be able to see that. And there's a couple of different things, the authentication and authorization piece of it, the query strings, classes that are in use in the transport, and obviously the individual field names in the data dictionary itself. So on the engagement side, I wanted to just we're going to leave this name agnostic, so we're not going to mention anybody in any of this, but I will tell you that, to date, we've worked with 6 MLS partners. It's great that we have 6, but I think you're going to hear a theme in some of the discussions later that it's not enough. We'd really like to have a lot more than 6, and it's been difficult to get these 6 and get them started. So I think this is something we definitely want to try to discuss and get to be a little bit easier. But we have 6, and we're very happy to be working with them. Those 6 are on 3 different vendors. We've got all sorts of different levels of certification on Data Dictionary and on a web API. And we did do testing on this on both Data Dictionary over RETS and web API, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. This is a slide just if you want to take home. We just wanted to list some of the resources that we've engaged with while doing this, both in training and in documentation that we found useful. So I'm not going to read over all these, but if you take this slide home with you, there's some links here that you may find of value too. But we're going to dig into a little bit more of the implementation details. I'm going to pass it over to Brian.
Thanks, Sean.
Give those to you.
Appreciate it. So on the technological front, let's see. So software-wise, this is kind of a general overview of our system itself. It's a proprietary microservice-oriented framework. Sorry about that. There you go. Should have got that little mic after all. So the framework itself, we built this way because we wanted it to be expandable, cloud-ready, or actually lives in the cloud, and be able to scale up to whatever size we needed, since our processing is not consistent. It varies based on time of day, seasonality, that kind of stuff. It uses a messaging queue system, which also gives us that ability to pass jobs around and do as needed there. And we did use an NoSQL database. They're very popular. It also helped us development-wise cut out the DBA changes or database changes that are required to actually keep that up. It made us a little faster on our feet for developing, which we actually wanted to do. Hardware-wise, just a quick overview. Obviously, it's got to be cloud-ready. It lives in the cloud. We have both public and private cloud resources that we can scale up as needed and add more workers to the pipeline if needed. And then just overall, right now it's running on 90 CPUs and 44 virtual servers. Let's see. So development effort-wise, these are just some numbers that kind of will guide us through how the actual effort went. This is specifically Data Dictionary using the RETS legacy or 1X transport. So there'll be another slide about how it actually works on web API. So we knew that the framework and the listing source, like Son said, the first one was going to be the most. So it took us 228 development hours to do that. That involved, there's a lot of changes required as we start getting through them and looking at individual cases. So that took a little extra time. The second one we managed to get through a little quicker, 46 hours of development time, but that's still a lot. It kind of indicating that there might be some friction there, that the second one, still took at least one developer, probably that's 2 weeks of work time actually. And then the third one, we improved a little more, down to 24 hours. There we go. The transition is a little strange. So the lessons learned, because that's really the important part. We got it working, and that worked. Some of the stuff that we really liked about it. So the uniform resource and field names, that helped us actually quite a bit. That cut a lot of the unknowns out of it and what we actually might even look for in the metadata to find. The closed enumeration lists, so that was something we were really big fans of. It's really nice to be able to know the exact data points that everybody's using. Anytime you have something that's open, those are edge cases that we have to either think about and put coding into, or it's basically data that we don't actually have the ability to use because we don't really even have any way to know what that data is. So that was really helpful for our aspect here. And then actually the documentation was really good. We were happy about that. There's a lot of documentation, but it's pretty clear cut, and we really didn't have any confusion about how the data dictionary was actually going to work and what we needed to do, which was great. There is some stuff that we thought still needed some attention that may have caused us trouble, like I commented on open enumeration lists. Anytime we had that, for the most part, an open enumeration list had everything we needed in it, but there was always that question mark on the end, which is what happens when maybe an MLS puts something in here. That would be custom code that we would have to go in and do. And one of the goals of what we're trying to do here is build a system that, unlike our legacy systems where it's almost custom by MLS practically, this was something that would be generic enough to use everywhere. So that was kind of a little sand in the works. This was more minor, but there is two different ways you can get images, URLs versus raw image data. We would probably prefer to have one or the other. We prefer image URLs, but this required us to have two pathways. It wasn't a major thing, but it seems like web APIs perhaps handled that, but still in data dictionary it can kind of go either way. And we didn't really consider this is RETS 1X plus data dictionary to be a turnkey solution because the transport layer was the part that really caused us, the most work, and that's why those second and third feeds still required a good bit of customization. Good transport is really important, and we didn't quite have that. And then just the aspect of it that it is a very open standard to cover almost any situation you could come up with. Data-wise, that creates more work because there's a lot of edge cases outside of the primary use, and we have to decide on an individual basis, is this worth the development time to do it, or do we just kind of hope that it doesn't come up, or we have to handle it when it does? So that's why, I wouldn't be shocked if, the 10th or the 20th feed might still have a lot of hours associated with it as we find new places that we need to do a little extra work on. So that brings us to the web API plus data dictionary, which I think is a much better story. The framework in our first listing source there took us 165 hours. Obviously, we knew data dictionary, but that was mostly developing the web API aspect of it. And then the second one, we managed to get it done only in 16 hours. A lot of this, too, I think, is related to just the growing pains that come with a standard that's not really all that well utilized in production environments. A lot of people are supporting it, but it's probably not been used, so maybe there's dark corners that haven't quite been looked into. There we go. So that was better, going down. So some of the lessons learned within the web API and data dictionary. So the uniform class names, that was one of the biggest things that we had in the data dictionary and RETS part, is that because the class names varied from MLS to MLS, it made the system we were trying to build to be generic take a lot more work. We did manage to put one together previously, but here with the uniform class names being as they were, we knew exactly what we were getting and where to get it and what it would be named, and that allowed us for a very simplistic query that would cover hopefully all feeds we might ever see. And then the simplified query was good, but it was human readable in a way that really was much more difficult with RETS. So that helps us because, as Sean mentioned, we know we have data feed problems that come up every single day, and we have data analysts that work on those, and it helps when maybe they're not quite developers. They can get in and look at these and actually help us find the problems, and that speeds quite a bit. And then that query consistency means that development for new feeds is much easier. Our hope is to get to a point where there really isn't any development for new feeds. It's all the same standard. We haven't got there yet, but that is where we're targeting. So some of the stuff that we thought still needed attention. So the biggest part was variances in how authentication authorization works. It was kind of all over the place. Most cases, we actually just got a permanent access token from our partners, and that was the end of it. That was really easy for us, but it didn't really get into the complexity of that situation. And I'm hoping that maybe we can find some improvement down the road or an easier way to do that, because that was one that caused us the most trouble. We're not experts on OAuth, and so that created some trouble there. Other minor things probably. We originally thought that the standard supported JSON and XML because it kind of says it has to support one of these. In practice, that actually turned out to mean that it was just JSON and it was quote an or situation. That required us a little unexpected development when we discovered that. Obviously, JSON's great and probably a lot better than XML in these kind of cases, but that wasn't clear in the standard, probably could be. This is probably not a standard issue, but it's something that we still struggled with during this study, which was we would get access to web API feeds and it would have wildly different data in it that actually we were getting currently, because most of these were testing feeds we already had a different RETS feed for that was still in production. So sometimes we could just say, hey, what's all this data from? And then it would just be a modification on the partner side to say, oh, yeah, sorry about that. But that required us to add an extra step in here to make sure that we were very careful about that. We couldn't go to production without being absolutely certain that it was there. I think that's more of a growing pain issue, but that was definitely something that came up for us. And there was variances in opt-in discrepancies. Maybe they were, oh, we didn't put the opt-in part on this, and we'll get that worked out. So most of the trouble there was just probably we were the first people actually to use it. So the OData documentation itself, I'm sure anyone that's looked at it knows it's very expansive, and you really kind of have to be an expert at it. And we didn't really have that kind of expertise, at least at the time. So it was a bit of a drag because of that. The web API documentation itself didn't really have any examples of the kind of use cases we had. There were some examples, but it wasn't really what we needed, which was multiple statuses, multiple listings types, and kind of the bulk provider scenario that we had, where we wanted to download this data and actually store it for use in our own servers. So that created a lot of back and forth with our partners that we had to say, hey, how would we get this kind of data out? And they would kind of give us a little training on it. And once we talked, we would really get generic examples that we could, put into production for everybody. But with some examples, just to do these basic things, we probably would have saved ourselves some time, and perhaps future people coming through would actually do with a little extra documentation. That probably would help them quite a bit. So moving forward, we know that we got these working, but we obviously need to keep up with the growth of the standard and how that's going to change. So our number one is what have we done to prepare? Well, staying involved in the work group and what RESO is doing is really the most important part. Hopefully some of the feedback we have, we can bring to the table and maybe get some improvements made. And obviously other use cases, other changes from other parties will come up, and we need to stay involved in that. That's kind of something that we're committed to, as Sean mentioned early on, is seeing this succeed. On a technical level, we didn't put it in now, but we have plans to, because as Data Dictionary 1.6 becomes 1.7 and 1.8 and on into it, we expect a time will come when maybe some vendors or some MLSs update and others don't, and as long as the changes are minor, maybe it's not a big deal, but we're anticipating that one day we may have to support a broad range of different data dictionary formats as it moves through. So that's something we probably need to put some development work into to making that work. And along those same lines, the certification levels that we had access to, they were wildly different amounts of data. We'd like to do a little more, since we know what certification level it is that the partner we're working with has, to say, hey, if it's got this level, use these fields. If it doesn't, we can fall back and use a different one. And that would obviously be something that would be helpful, and say, hey, the more certification you have, the better we can provide good data on our portal for it. So I think that's all on this one. Yeah. I'll turn it back over to you for the actual results of it, Sean.
One thing I meant to say earlier and I forgot is that our use case is probably outside of, the documented scope for the web API, our use case is outside of. Obviously the web API supports it. That's why we've been able to do this. And I think it's something they're going to address in the future. But our customers, the way we service our product to our customers requires us to consume and host data ourselves. We can't rely on a web API call to render data to our customer. It's not a realistic solution for us. So we are using this platform to pull data from our suppliers and source it ourselves. So I should have mentioned that earlier, because some of the bullet points he talked about, obviously that's reflected in our use case. But in the results so far, in production, we do already have 3 MLSs on the data dictionary, and 2 of them are over the web API. So that's good news. We're happy to have those out in the wild and in use now. We're still working on, Brian mentioned earlier, we're still, haven't tackled the OpenID Connect piece. Again, our use case is a little different because our requests are not initiating from a user. They're initiating from a back-end service, right? And the data dictionary version, he said, as he mentioned, we want to get that in place too. That's going to be important as this starts to grow. And, it's going to grow more quickly the more people that are adopting it. So as far as the results on our implementation, we talked about hours earlier. So data dictionary on RETS, obviously, we thought it was going to take us about 193 hours just in our grooming of this project. It went a lot higher than that. It's definitely more complicated. The old platform of RETS is certainly more complicated than Web API. And I think that's good news. I think that's a good reason for us to get Web API out there and get more people using that. We planned about 162 hours to get data dictionary on our platform with Web API, and we actually hit pretty close to that. We were quite pleased with that, so it took us about 163. Let's see, come on, there we go. So, what benefits did we see out of doing this so far? So the data dictionary on RETS, it's a little better. It's certainly more helpful for our data quality, but I would say the amount of time it took to implement it is not a huge jump. We saw about 25 hours before to about 16 now. And then when we start to get Web API involved, we went from about 25 hours we had in our legacy platform to set up a supplier to down to 2 for this last one. So I'm just going to mention that again because 2 is quite a significant jump. We think it'll get better than that, but 2 hours now that's fantastic. That's why we want to get more of these. We also found, as we mentioned with Data Dictionary, it's just the data quality and the matching that we do on our own model is a lot better. And being able to go through and do this effort, obviously everybody's got a lot of tech debt, and it let us kind of dig in and toss some of that away. So we were happy to be able to take that initiative on. How did it relate to our charter at the beginning? So time to build a new MLS feed, it's about a 92% reduction if you look at those hours up top. So that, that's a huge improvement. For the second question, we talked about converting existing feeds. Honestly, these are kind of the same process, so you'll see the same result there. And we're real excited about that. Updating established feeds, we haven't made it to that point yet. We're still kind of focused on the two parts, so we don't really have an update for you there, but we're hopeful that'll be improved, and the same thing with troubleshooting listing issues. We haven't finalized our review of that yet. So all in all, we give a little fireworks because we're pretty excited about the outcome of this slide and what it means. And honestly, since I guess we're in San Diego, maybe it's more of a cheers because we're in a great beer city. Again, if there's any questions, I just put this slide up here for our contacts again. Go for it. Dan.
Two questions.
Sure.
One, did you notice any speed differences in transport between the new web stuff and the old web stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. We found that the web API seemed like it was quite a bit faster, especially since we were using JSON for the most part, which just itself is a major reduction in space. But it was faster, yeah, web API.
Second, did you use one of the reference client tools like the .NET stuff, or did you guys roll your own?
We rolled our own. Yeah, we don't have a .NET shop that would have made that easy to use, so it was easier for us to write our own. That might have been part of the trouble that we had with the way the authentication aspect was working. I hear there's some good plugins for that, but it was not available in a language we could use, so we kind of had to work on our own there. And
What language?
this is all written in Perl. Other questions?
All right. Thanks, everyone.